Let's start off with the Thursday night game, the Broncos versus the Chargers. This game was very strong performance from both teams offensively overall. Not a ton of strong defense was being played in this one, although the Broncos' run defense, particularly early, was pretty stout. The rest of the phases of defense from both sides were not very consistently good. If you look at the total in this one, it ended up going over by about 4.5 points, depending on the line that you had, and it got there mainly because both teams were 100% convergent inside of the red zone. Broncos 4 for 4, Chargers 3 for 3. So if you were on the over, that was if one of these teams did not convert in the red zone even once, you're not probably winning that wager, but I was neutral on that. I thought the line was right, so I did not have anything for clients on the total on this game. When you're looking at performance here, Broncos were up 28-14 heading into the fourth quarter. It was close at the beginning of the game, 0-0, and everybody thought a lower scoring game was to be had here. Obviously, the first half total did go under, but both teams opened it up in the second and third quarters and just sort of maintained a 14-point victory for the Broncos through the fourth quarter. If you look at the quarterback performances here, strong outing for both these guys in terms of completion percentage. Phillip Rivers 73%, Peyton Manning 71%. The only difference here between the two guys was that Phillip Rivers only passed for 6 yards per attempt. Peyton was up at 8.2 yards per attempt. Peyton was able to only pass the ball 35 times, whereas Phillip Rivers passed it over 40 times. Peyton was able to run the ball a lot more because they had the lead, and Hillman was running efficiently. Chargers only ran the ball 15 times during the game. They gained 4.1 yards per attempt, but most of that came later in the game when the defense was backing off a bit to break out some larger chunk-style runs. Most of it was early. It was stuffed close to the line of scrimmage for marginal gains. Phillip Rivers did toss 2 interceptions. That's a big difference in this game. If you're going into Denver and trying to win, obviously you have to, A, maintain time of possession by converting on third downs. They only converted 40% of their third downs, so not good enough. B, you have to, when you get down in the red zone, you have to score touchdowns. They did that, 3 of 3 inside the red zone. But C, you cannot turn the ball over, and obviously Phillip Rivers turned the ball over on 2 interceptions. They got no takeaways from the Broncos. So by the fact that they turned the ball over a couple times and were bad on third down was really the difference in this game. Looking at a very good divisional battle, which really had some monumental swings in division, were the Baltimore Ravens at the Cincinnati Bengals. This game, you kind of wondered where the defenses were for some point in time. We saw a lot of turnovers in this game, 2 for each side. And both teams, we had 9 total red zone attempts in this game, 5 for the Bengals and 4 for the Ravens. So a lot of red zone opportunities for both of these squads to put up points on the board. That's why we saw a 27-24 final score in this one that did go over the total. Was just a lot of red zone opportunities, some of them definitely off of turnovers. The key storyline for this game, the main takeaway, I think, is consistent with what you envision of the Baltimore Ravens on the road, and that's struggles of Joe Flacco. He got it together down in the postseason a couple years ago to make that run for the Super Bowl, which got him the huge contract. But throughout his career and even recent times, he has not been very strong on the road. In this game, no real difference here. 17 of 34 passing. That's really terrible. 50% conversions. That was 28th in the league out of 30 quarterbacks, so the third worst number there. Only 5.5 yards per attempt, which was also third worst. Only 187 total passing yards on 34 pass attempts. That's bad, of course. His passer rating was only 42. That was second worst in the league this week, only being outdone by the combination of Geno Smith and Michael Vick's performance for the New York Jets there. He did throw 2 interceptions, did Joe Flacco, and no passing touchdowns, so that is what propelled his pitiful 42 passer rating. Both teams were able to do a good job of stuffing the opponent's run. The Baltimore Ravens, they did run for 4.1 yards per carry, which is okay. It was 16th in the league, about average. The Ravens, though, were able to stuff the Bengals, held them to only 3.3 yards per carry. Now, the Bengals did not stop running the ball. They ran it 34 times, only 111 rushing yards. So they continued to run even though they weren't gaining a whole lot. Their pass game, they only threw 28 pass attempts, so definitely more rushes than passes. But they had big chunk plays in the pass game, 8.5 yards per pass attempt, no bigger than a 3rd and 10 where Andy Dalton was flushed from the pocket out to the right and threw back across his body to the far sideline on the left-hand side of the field to Mohamed Sanu, who caught a great pass in the midst of double coverage. He ran back to the ball, split through 2 Baltimore Ravens defenders for a huge gain as probably a 30-yard completion late in that game as the Bengals were down on the scoreboard in the fourth quarter to help lead them to the go-ahead score in that game. The Baltimore Ravens only punted the ball 1 time, only 3 punts for the Cincinnati Bengals, so you would assume that we had some either good early down success rate or good third down conversions, and actually the Baltimore Ravens not especially good on either part, only 18th in early down success rate offense, 20th in third down conversions. The Bengals were 5th in third down conversions at 57%, so very strong effort from the Bengals offense, particularly that passing game. Once Jimmy Smith was not playing for the Ravens, they had some definitely good opportunities to pass the ball on the Baltimore Ravens secondary, so it'll be interesting to see. I know Smith is not expected to play this week, how the Pittsburgh Steelers try to attack that Baltimore Ravens secondary. Skipping down to the Oakland Raiders and the Cleveland Browns, a very ugly game here. 7 punts for both teams combined. That's 14 punts during the game. Teams could not run the ball whatsoever. The Browns only ran it for 1.6 yards per attempt, only 39 total rushing yards on 25 carries. That's horrible, worst in the league. The Oakland Raiders, not much better, only 3.2 yards per attempt, only 71 total rushing yards on 22 rushes. Very bad numbers there. Passing, was bad for the Oakland Raiders as well, only 5.6 yards per attempt, a 75 passer rating. They passed the ball for whatever reason 56 times. This was a very close ball game if you think about it. Heading into the fourth quarter, the score of the ball game was 9-6. Teams did not even score in the third quarter, so it was 9-6 entering the fourth quarter. Yet somehow, with the terrible quarterbacking of the Oakland Raiders, they decided it was in their best interest to pass the ball 56 times to only run the ball 22 times. That ratio certainly is not going to get it done with the quarterback play that they have in a very close and competitive one-score ball game that they were only down by 3 points for about half the game. So that was a very odd decision-making in that game, certainly. Did not know what they were trying to accomplish with that. They did turn the ball over 3 times. 1 was an interception, 2 were fumbles lost. The Browns did not turn the ball over whatsoever. Now, the Raiders did a great job of limiting conversions from the Browns. As I said, they punted 7 times, so obviously they could not have done well on third down, and they did not. Only 17% conversions on third down. That was the 4th worst in the league. The Oakland Raiders, not much better, though, 32%. That was 23rd in the league. Neither team was very good on early down success rate either, so not very strong numbers there. But I think the story here is obviously the turnovers for the Raiders and then their decision-making to pass the ball so often as opposed to try to be a little bit more balanced. And consistent with what the Browns have been getting from their offense, it's not a whole lot of pass attempts. They only completed 19 passes, but they threw for 9.5 yards per attempt. So they're taking these shots as well as just breaking some runs after the catch and getting some good gains on very few passes. So their yards per pass numbers when they're doing well and winning games have been really tremendously high. Skipping to the Buccaneers and the Vikings, a very ugly game in this one. Even more punts than the prior game we just discussed, the Raiders and the Browns. There's actually 15 punts in this game, 7 for the Bucs and 8 for the Minnesota Vikings. When you look at the turnovers, the story of the game, I think, again, we see a team with multiple turnovers and one team with no turnovers, and the team with no turnovers won the game. Not surprisingly there, especially there was an overtime turnover, which actually the Minnesota Vikings picked the ball up and ran it in for the game-winning touchdown to win this game, 19-13. A very low-scoring game. Neither quarterback was able to pass the ball very efficiently. Only 5.7 yards per attempt for the Bucs, 5.6 yards per attempt for Teddy Bridgewater and the Vikings. The Bucs could not run the ball either. 23 rush attempts, only 2.9 yards per carry in that game. So their grand total of yards per play was only 4 yards per play. That was 3rd worst in the league this past weekend. Teams did not get down into the red zone whatsoever. This game, only 3 total red zone attempts using both teams combined. That's amazing to even attempt to only get in there 3 times for both teams is pretty shocking. The Bucs, terrible on third down, 8%. They went 1 of 12 on third down. That is the league's worst record third down conversions this past weekend. And obviously this game ended in a tie. We went to overtime. Biggest lead during the game, Vikings were up by 10 at one point. Bucs actually held a lead of 3 for one point in time, but an ugly, low-scoring game that certainly, even if you're looking to check out some of these young quarterbacks, you want to see what Glennon's going to do, you want to see what Bridgewater's going to do. This really was not a good game to watch either of those guys. They just did not perform very well. Either of them, not very strong outing for this passing offenses of either team. Moving to the Cardinals versus the Eagles, this was one of the better games in the late afternoon slate. And the main key for this game, the main takeaway was lack of red zone offensive efficiency. I mentioned this on Twitter heading into this game, but both of these teams ranked number 31 and 32 in terms of red zone conversion percentage. I always ask, do you think that this carries forward? And I mean, the fact is sometimes stats will regress a little bit, but when you have 8 weeks of data, 7 weeks of data that are suggesting teams are struggling in the red zone, generally I've seen historically that tends to continue until there's like a major sea change or something along those lines. And in this game, we had 5 total trips to the red zone, only 1 touchdown, and that was by the Cardinals. The Eagles were 0 of 3 in the red zone, and obviously they lost this game 24-20, but that's the main problem for them. They have struggled inside of the red zone. If you can imagine how Chip Kelly's offense would be if they actually could convert when they got into the red zone. I think some of that is Nick Foles and his decision making, but regardless, if you look at some of the key statistics, whether it was number of total first downs, early down success rate, or third down conversion percentage, the Eagles were the better team in those 3 categories. Obviously, we know that they couldn't convert when they got into the red zone, but they did take one more trip to the Cardinals red zone than the Cardinals took into their red zone. You look at the completion percentage for the quarterbacks. Nick Foles was 58%, Carson Palmer only 48%. 48% against this Eagles defense. That was the second worst number of any quarterbacks this past weekend, second only to what the Jets did between Michael Vick and Geno Smith. So that was obviously a very terrible performance from him from that perspective. And then you look at the running game, only 3.1 yards per rush attempt for the Cardinals. So they could not get it done in the air or on the ground. What they did is they hit on some big plays at key moments in that game through the passing game. That's why Carson Palmer's total numbers were 7.8 yards per pass attempt, which was better than what Nick Foles was able to do. But if you look at completion percentage, yards per rush attempt, all of those metrics, as well as everything else I already mentioned, the Philadelphia Eagles did play better football this past Sunday. What undid them, obviously, 2 things, and you can't win games if these are the 2 things that are undoing you. Number 1, turnovers. They had 2 interceptions by Nick Foles. The Cardinals had 0 from Carson Palmer, so that was a big difference in their 3 total turnovers versus just 1 for the Cardinals. And then the red zone, they went 0 for 3 in the red zone. So you can't expect to win games giving the other team 2 extra turnovers and not scoring a single touchdown inside the red zone. Ultimately, they somehow led at the end of this game, which speaks highly of what Philadelphia is able to do. And I think overall their performance was pretty good because it's a good Cardinals team, and you're playing at home. So it going into Arizona and playing as well as they did in a large number of the phases against a very good defense was somewhat impressive from this Philadelphia Eagles team. They just had key mistakes that undid them. It'll be interesting to see how they play on the road against Houston this upcoming Sunday. Looking at the Chiefs versus the Rams, this is an easy game, I think. For me, the way that I broke this game down for clients heading into it was I love Austin Davis. I've been high on the Rams. I've been taking the Rams sometimes. I've been taking their over sometimes in their games because they've been productive with Austin Davis. But my main concern in this game was they have not faced a defensive pass rush like what Kansas City has. The only time that they had struggles the past several weeks was in the second half against the 49ers a couple Mondays ago when the 49ers were able to get 5 sacks on Austin Davis. That was a red light in the back of my mind. I remembered that heading into this game, definitely a concern about the Chiefs pass rush. Sure enough, the Chiefs sacked Austin Davis 7 times, held him to only 4.6 yards per pass attempt at only 60% completions. His 68 passer rating was 26th in the league because he did throw 1 interception and only had 1 touchdown. And that obviously led to the team only gaining 3.9 yards per play, which was second worst in the NFL, and ultimately was an easy victory for the Kansas City Chiefs, 34-7. Offensively, Chiefs, I expected, this is kind of what you would expect against a Rams defense, which is not all that great. You're not expecting Alex Smith to throw 10 yards per pass attempt. You're not expecting them to have, 50 points on the scoreboard, but he was a very, very efficient 24 of 28, which is 86%, for 7.8 yards per attempt, a 99 passer rating. He threw, he didn't even throw a passing touchdown, so that's why that's not higher. He didn't throw any interceptions. And that is pretty much what I expected. So although I was somewhat, I looked at this total and was contemplating looking towards the over, but I ultimately decided not to do anything there because of the concerns with what I anticipated, Rams struggling offensively regarding the Chiefs pass rush, as well as the Chiefs just not being a very explosive offense. Sure enough, the game did fall under the total by 3 points. I took the Chiefs, but did not do anything with the total. You look at the Falcons versus the Lions. This game is over in London, and I was on the under, as my clients know. And this game, neither team could run the ball. We know that the Lions typically struggle without Calvin Johnson in there, and sure enough, Matt Stafford only 51% completions. That was 27th in the league. They only ran for 2.6 yards per rush, so their yards per play was very poor. Third down conversions against this terrible Falcons defense was actually pretty good, 53%. So the fans over in London got a pretty good product. There was only 7 punts total in the game. Both teams were moving the ball. What surprised me to an extent was the Lions' lack of defense early in the game. The Falcons were able to go up 21-0, but one of the main things, there's 2 takeaways from that just for your information moving forward. Number 1, the Falcons, despite all their problems with the offensive line, number 1 red zone offense in football right now in terms of what conversion percentage they're gaining versus what their average opponent is allowing. They're converting way more than what their average opponent is allowing. So that offense, Matt Ryan is making great decisions, and they certainly have playmakers at receiver there to convert inside the red zone. Very good at that. The Lions, the takeaway here is that the Lions are not as strong of a defense. I've been saying this for weeks now. I know it's going to come to fruition at some point. I certainly believe they got lucky in this game to end up coming back and winning this game from 21 down. They had never done that in franchise history. I believe that they were, 0-61 in franchise history if trailing at halftime by 21 points. Obviously, they came back and won that game, but that Lions defense, if you look at their strength of schedule in terms of who they've played, very poor opposing offenses in general. Spoke about Teddy Bridgewater and a lot of offenses that are struggling on their schedule. To allow the Falcons, whose offense is struggling obviously, to come in and roll up 21 points in the first half and go 3 for 3 in the red zone, that should be a big concern. Now, they do go into the bye week, but pay attention coming out of the bye and how this team performs defensively. I have a feeling that despite everybody going bananas over this defense, that they are going to regress a little bit. So keep that in mind, especially when they're playing some better offensive opposition. I think their hallmark victory was that holding Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers to only 7 points as they won 19-7. That was the lone good offense that they really held in check. They've held a lot of poor offenses in check, and I think these defensive numbers are going to regress when they start playing some better offenses, but we'll have to see. Looking at the Jaguars versus the Dolphins, this game was I don't even want to say it was a terrible game. It just was not a very exciting game to watch. There was 4 total turnovers in the game. A couple takeaways here. I know the under was a play that people were looking at, and of course there were obviously 2 defensive touchdowns in this game scored by the Dolphins off of interceptions by Blake Bortles. But keep in mind that both teams went a combined 1 of 5 inside the red zone. So you're not going to have many games go over the total when you're only 1 of 5 in the red zone. The Jaguars only got to the red zone once and did not convert. The Dolphins got there 4 times, only converted once. So you could say, well, this game could have gone over had they scored more there, but then you could also argue that it's not going to have as many non-offensive touchdowns in the game. So it's a tough game to predict. I didn't really see any value with the total on this one, so that's why we stayed away from it. Both teams very efficient running the ball. Actually kind of surprising at how the Jaguars did running the ball against this Dolphins defense. They ran 30 times for 176 rushing yards. That's 5.9 yards per rush. The Dolphins were able to get 6.2 yards per rush on this defense. We know that the San Diego Chargers struggle to run the ball. So obviously if this is some sort of a deficiency that could rear its head for the Miami Dolphins, it might not be able to be taken advantage of by the San Diego Chargers offense because they're not that great at running the ball. When we look at the Jaguars offensively, both quarterbacks struggled in these games. 56 passer rating for Blake Bortles, 71 passer rating for the Miami Dolphins' Ryan Tannehill. So other than that, nothing really too exciting in this game. Jumping to the Jets and the Bills, this game obviously very surprising and won easily by the Buffalo Bills based on New York Jets mistakes and turnovers. When you look at the turnovers, 6 turnovers from the New York Jets, 0 from the Bills. Certainly Doug Marrone interviewed at halftime as he was heading off saying that we should be beating this Jets team by much more than what we are. And they obviously were able to roll up the score a little bit there in the second half. They were up 24-17 at halftime and held the Jets to just 6 points. The rest of the game is they put up 19 more in the second half. Now, the Bills' offense was not playing very well. When you look at two factors, number one, they cannot run the ball. 2.1 yards per carry. They tried 32 times. They tried to run the ball. They just were not getting anything out of the run game. And number two, whether it was early down success rate being 28th in the league or third down conversions being 25th in the league, only converting 25% of their third down attempts, this offense was not very good. What they had, the only thing they had, in 10 pass completions from Kyle Orton, they gained 213 yards. That's 21 yards per completion, 12.5 yards per attempt, number one in the NFL. 4 passing touchdowns on only 12 completions. That is baffling. How in the world is a team only going to have 10 completions and have 4 passing touchdowns? Ridiculous. 143 passer rating. It obviously would have been higher. They didn't throw any interceptions, but just not enough passing yards because they only completed 10 passes, 10 of 17. So it's not like they were passing the ball a lot. Only attempted 17 passes the entire game. Ran it almost twice as often because they were up throughout this game, even though they were running for hardly anything. Just a utterly abysmal performance by the New York Jets in this game. Very humiliating performance. Looking at the Seattle Seahawks and Carolina Panthers, this game certainly much lower scoring than what I expected in this ball game. Historically, yeah, these teams have played to low-scoring games, but both of their defenses are not very good. What we saw here, I believe, is growing pains and early signs of regression from both of these offenses. When you look at what Cam Newton did 2 weeks ago up in Green Bay, it was not very good. He came home against the Seattle Seahawks team that was lit up by basically the last several quarterbacks that they faced, whether you're talking about Tony Romo, whether you're talking about Austin Davis. Any of these guys are passing all over on the Seattle Seahawks. Cam Newton, only 12 of 22, that's 55% completion. That's terrible. 6.9 yards per attempt, that was middle of the road. 16th in the league this past week. 57 passer rating, that was 4th worst in the league because he did throw 1 interception and had no passing touchdowns. So his numbers were abysmal. When you look at what the Panthers rushing offense did, only 3.7 yards per carry. So we didn't expect maybe a whole lot out of the run game, but the way teams have been moving the ball on Seattle has been through the air and passing. And we saw Cam Newton and the Panthers get down into the red zone 3 times and come away with no touchdowns. They had a couple of turnovers down in that area of the field. It was just a terrible performance offensively from the Carolina Panthers. Let a lot of opportunities slip through their hands, and when they were down in scoring position, fumbling or going for it on 4th down and not getting it. It just really was a bad offensive performance. When you look at the flip side of Russell Wilson, he looked horrible as well. When you look at his passing numbers, only 6 yards per pass attempt. That was 22nd in the league. His 76 passer rating was also 22nd in the league last week. They were able to run the ball for 4.6 yards per carry, 119 total rushing yards, but they got down into the red zone 3 times, did not convert a single touchdown inside of the red zone. If you look at what they were in goal-to-go situations, 0 of 3 in goal-to-go situations against this Carolina Panthers defense. And I pulled out the statistic heading into this ballgame that the Carolina Panthers were 116% worse than an average team inside the red zone, inside goal-to-go situations. They had allowed 14 trips year-to-date inside their 10-yard line. 13 touchdowns were scored. Only the Pittsburgh Steelers kicked a field goal inside of their 10-yard line. The Steelers were 3 of 4 for touchdowns inside their 10-yard line. The one that they didn't make, they kicked a field goal. In this case, we had turnovers. We had interception inside the 10-yard line. We also had just field goal attempts and whatnot. It was a pitiful performance for the Seattle Seahawks offense. And again, I think this is we saw them get by against the St. Louis Rams, who have a very terrible defense without Percy Harvin. We saw Doug Baldwin really step up and play really well, and Russell Wilson didn't play well throughout the course of the game, but got it done when it mattered, which is kind of a calling card that he has. But this game against the Panthers, bad defense, I think is a sign of potentially things to come from this offense if they are as ineffective as they were against this Carolina Panthers offense. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this offense moving forward, and the past 2 weeks, the offense has not looked good. We'll have to see how it looks over the course of the next several games, but the problem for them is they've been able to rely on their defense historically. That defense is not nearly as good. That defense is not as good as what it looked on Sunday. I can just tell you that for a fact. That was Cam Newton and him being terrible on Sunday. That was not the Seattle Seahawks defense there, and if the defense isn't playing well and that offense isn't playing well, I don't see the Seahawks making a whole lot of noise there. It's going to be tough probably for them to even get by the Arizona Cardinals in that division. I know that sounds ludicrous and blasphemous, but if that offense doesn't step up a little bit, one of those sides of the ball has to step up. It's got to be the offense or the defense or a combination of both. Looking at the New England Patriots and the Chicago Bears, this game, I mean, what can you say? I was on the over here. I think I got it at 50, and the Patriots scored 51 themselves. It was a ridiculous offensive influx from them. They led by 38 points at one point in time during the game. The Bears never led at all in this game, and I know a lot of people were on the Bears. My concern, I did some research and saw the Bears linebackers. I mean, first of all, I've been saying this for a few weeks now. The Bears defense stinks. The Bears defense stinks. Forget what you've seen. The Bears defense stinks. And people were still thinking that this Bears defense was actually good. They have multiple linebackers that were out for this game, starting injured players. They had Kyle Fuller in there who was injured. He played a little bit at the beginning of the game. Then I believe he had to depart. That defense is terrible. So if this wasn't a wake-up call for anybody who's thinking the Bears defense is good, I don't know what to tell you. They're on a bye this week. We'll see what their health status is coming off the bye. But certainly not a position to take to back the Bears in this game, in my opinion. Now, we did see that one of the things I was surprised with is I thought this Bears offense would get it back on track a little bit more against the Patriots. The Patriots defense is not that great. They've got injuries. And what we saw in this game was that the Bears were able to run the ball, 5.9 yards per carry. That's pretty damn good. 153 total rushing yards. So that is strong. And they actually had an okay balance, 35 pass attempts, 26 rush attempts. When you're down by that many points, that balance is not terrible, in my opinion. The main issue here is the lack of ball possession that they had. The Patriots had the ball for 33 minutes in the game, and the Bears just weren't able to possess the ball long enough to actually aggregate these statistics and build on the total yards they needed and put the ball into the red zone enough. If you look at some of these numbers, first of all, the Bears failed on third down too often. They were only 36% conversions on third down. The Patriots were 64%. That was number one in the league, 64% on third down. And get this statistic. This is absolutely ridiculous. They were the second best early down success rate offense as well. So they had 32 total first downs did the Patriots. Only went to third down 11 times. So they're skipping third downs left and right. When they finally do go to third down, they're converting 64% of their third down attempts. That was best in the league. That's obviously obscene. So no wonder they got into the red zone 7 times with the Bears. The Bears only got into their red zone once. So you look at goal-to-go situations, the Patriots, 4 or 5 inside the Bears' 10-yard line scoring touchdowns. The Bears only got into the Patriots' 10-yard line once. So just a total domination by the New England Patriots, the Bears' offense. I was pretty shocked at how ineffective they were in terms of converting on third down when they had the ball. I was not shocked whatsoever that they couldn't hang with them because of how bad their defense is, and that's the reason for my over in this spot. When you look at the Saints and the Packers, the Sunday night game, obviously, a great game that played on the field. Unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and obviously we know what happened after that point in time. He had not thrown an interception prior to that point in time. I don't know even if they trailed at all during the first half. I think it was a very competitive, close game. Touchdown here, touchdown there, field goal here, field goal there. It was just a back and forth game. There actually were 0 punts in this entire game. So I believe that the Packers never trailed at all when Aaron Rodgers was healthy. He gets the ball at the beginning of the third quarter, drives down, and I believe tweaks his hamstring. At that point in time, that offense was not the same. And it's a shame because obviously the game went over the total easily, which is what I was on in this game. But and I also had the Packers in a teaser, and I took the Saints on the money line to come back. And I was anticipating a much closer game. And I certainly think we had a very good opportunity to probably win all 3 of those wagers if you're talking about if Aaron Rodgers does not get injured, because, like I said, they did not trail at all during the first half. And we know that the Saints certainly came out guns blazing there in the third quarter, went up 14 points. But if you look at some of these statistics, even with that injury to Aaron Rodgers, the Packers still passed for 402 yards, 100 more passing yards than did the Saints, 10.1 yards per attempt, better than 9.4 of the Saints. The teams were able to run the ball very effectively because their passing games were clicking. So when you look at these run numbers, obviously well above average when you're talking about the Packers ran for 4.7 yards per attempt, the Saints ran for 6.2 yards per attempt. Both of those numbers absolutely stellar. These teams got down into the red zone a total of 10 times during this game. It was just up and down the field. The main reason why we probably didn't even see 80 points or more in this game was because they were ineffective once they got into the red zone. They only scored 3 touchdowns inside the red zone this entire game, yet there were 67 points scored in this game. Only 3 of them came from red zone conversions. Out of those 10 times they got there, they only converted 3 inside the red zone. The other attempts resulted in a bunch of field goals, and then they got the other points from just bigger explosive touchdowns that never got inside the 10-yard line. But overall, very entertaining, very exciting game, and obviously no punch that doesn't hurt anything. The Steelers and the Colts very similar to what we saw with the Saints and the Packers in that there were very few punts in this game, although each team did have 3. It's still below the average, but we weren't expecting maybe that type of offensive output. I didn't have anything on the total in this game, so I was obviously shocked as anybody to see the final score, 51-34. It was absolutely ridiculous. When you talk about Ben Roethlisberger's performance, hats off, kudos. It was lights out. When you're talking about passing the ball, check out these numbers. It's just off the charts, tremendous. He attempted 49 passes in this game. 49 is obviously a lot. He completed 82% of those passes. So it's one thing if you're passing 10 times, 20 times, and you're completing 82%. When you're passing almost 50 times and you're completing 82%, that's ridiculous. Now, it's another thing if you're actually passing down the field versus close to the line of scrimmage. His 49 pass attempts, averaged 10.7 yards per attempt. That was the second most in the NFL. If you look at the most, that was, I mentioned the game earlier, the Buffalo Bills, Kyle Orton, 12.5 yards per attempt. He only attempted 17 passes and averaged 12.5 yards per attempt over 17 passes, and his completion percentage was only 59%. Ben attempted 49 passes and had 10.7 yards per attempt. His completion percentage, 82%. Absolutely ridiculous numbers here. 151 passer rating, 6 passing touchdowns. They had 1 rushing touchdown. Both teams top 6 in early down success rate offense. It's really hard to fault, either team in this spot. The crazy part about this game when I was watching it, number one, was the fact that the Colts were able to mount a comeback, and it was down to a 1-score game late when Andrew Luck tripped himself, fell down on the goal line and threw this ridiculous ball and ended up getting called for a safety. And from that point, obviously, the Steelers then scored, I believe, yet another touchdown and increased the lead substantially just within a couple of plays like they've done over the last couple of weeks there against that game in Houston. But at any rate, I was surprised that the Colts were able to mount a comeback there. I think one of the main issues for the Steelers, what got them really rolling in this game, because the score was only 7-3 after the first quarter, was there was an injury to the Colts starting cornerback. Vontae Davis went out of the game. At that point in time, Ben and the Steelers knew we could pick on this guy. It opened things up a lot, pick on his replacement. And when they started doing that, it opened things a lot in that passing game. I certainly don't think they went into this game with the anticipation or the thought that they were going to pass the ball 50 times in this game with a lead. But when they had that mismatch, I certainly commend offensive coordinators for taking advantage of mismatches. They had a mismatch there. They decided, well, hey, we're just going to keep passing the ball here. Even with a big lead, they only ran it 32 times, like I said, almost 50 pass attempts. So went after that weakness of the Colts and took advantage of it. Texans versus the Titans. This game was as much about the Texans defense as it was anything else, because the Texans offense, Ryan Fitzpatrick, only 19 of 35, which is 54% completions, only 5.5 yards per pass attempt. That's 27th in the league. Very poor numbers there. When you look at their yards per play, only 5.1, 24th in the league. So not a very good performance from the Texans offense in this game. How did they roll up 30 points? Well, obviously, a few ways. Number one, they held the Titans offense in check. Only 13 first downs gained by the Tennessee Titans. If you look at their early on success rate and their third down conversion rate, both of those 27th in the league out of 30 teams. If you look at their yards per rush, only 2.8. That was also 27th in the league. So they ran for a total of 36 rushing yards, did the Titans. And that's what they had. They had no time of possession as a result. 36 minutes time of possession for the Texans, only 24 for the Titans, because the Texans were able to run the ball effectively, 5.3 yards per rush. That's 212 total rushing yards on 40 carries. And they were able to control the clock, control the tempo, get into the red zone. When they got into the red zone, it's funny, both these teams were only 2 of 4 in the red zone, yet the Texans won the game 30-16. It was just this time of possession, keeping the opposing defense out on the field, and the Titans offense really could not be effective with the rookie quarterback in there. They maybe started him 1 week too early going up against this Texans defensive line, which obviously is very stout, but we'll have to see. Now Tennessee's on a bye, so they probably wanted to get a little bit of tape so that Mettenberger could study it during the bye week and try to figure out some things so that when they come back off the bye, he can try to improve on those. I can't fault them for doing that. This season is a loss for them anyway, so they're just trying to see how the new car drives, so to speak. With the Redskins and Cowboys on Monday night, I think this was the game that a lot of us have been waiting for. This was the game where we anticipated, maybe not this game, but we've been waiting for a game like this where the Cowboys defense would be able to be somewhat exposed. And it was interesting because that exposure came not at the result of a Russell Wilson or any of these Eli Manning or one of these Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. It came at the hands of Colt McCoy. And Colt McCoy did not do much in this game at all. What he did in this game was be very efficient. Whether it was his scrambles for first down, the ability to just move out of the pocket to not take sacks. I think one of the main keys that the coaching staff wanted him to do was don't stand in the pocket and just force the ball down the field in double coverage if the pass rush is closing in on you. You got to move out of the pocket a little bit, buy yourself some time, and make a smarter decision. And sure enough, he was able to do that now. He did throw 1 interception in the game, which obviously Kirk Cousins was more than capable of doing. But what Colt McCoy did, 25 of 30, which is 83% pass completions. That is obviously tremendous. 4th best in the league. And 9.5 yards per pass attempt. That was 6th best in the league. This Redskins passing offense, obviously, with Deshaun Jackson there and even with Kirk Cousins, they're explosive. They can get the ball down the field. Jay Gruden calls a very aggressive offensive passing game plan, and so they're able to do that. So it didn't really surprise me that his passing numbers in terms of yards per pass attempt were pretty high. But what surprised me was his efficiency and his decision-making, which was commendable and earned them this victory, of course. They went 2 for 2 in the red zone, so we had only 4 total red zone attempts from both teams in this game. The Redskins went 2 of 2. The Cowboys only went 1 of 2. The Cowboys had 2 fumbles that they lost, so they lost the turnover battle. So pretty much what I said on this podcast last week is that I said the way that the Redskins can win this game is they have to control the time of possession, and they have to probably steal a couple of turnovers from the Dallas Cowboys. Otherwise, I don't see any way that they're going to win this game. I didn't necessarily expect them to be able to get both of those accomplished, but let's look at both of those. Time of possession. The Redskins held the ball for 38 minutes. The Cowboys only had it for 28 minutes. That was the second largest time of possession gap of any game this past week. So that was certainly, they took the blueprint of what the Cowboys had been doing, and they flipped it. Part of that was their pass rushes and their pressures on third downs in particular, forcing the Cowboys to only go 5 of 12 on third down, not bypassing third downs very often. Still not terrible numbers for Dallas's offense, but not top 5, not top 3 in the league. This was 13th and 14th in the league this past week in terms of early down success rate offense and third down conversion offense. The Redskins, they just control the time of possession, as I mentioned, and then they got a couple of turnovers, and that's exactly what the recipe is to pretty much win any game. It doesn't matter if it's the Dallas Cowboys or not, but the Dallas Cowboys, that defense can get exposed, and the way that they've been winning their games, as we've said on here since week 1, is by their offense, keeping their defense fresh and off the field, playing in very dictatable situations. When you're talking about the opposing offense now doesn't know when they're going to get the ball back. They're trying to force things and make things happen because they know that the Cowboys are going to get the ball, control it for a while, put up points on the scoreboard. So there's pressure on the opposing offense every single time that they have the ball. In this game, that really wasn't the case because they could blitz and got after Romo. He was getting sacks and throwing the ball away. They were punting on fourth downs instead of converting third downs. And then the Redskins were controlling the clock offensively. So I was extremely impressed by A, their defensive strategy, B, their offensive strategy, C, Colt McCoy's efficiency, and that ultimately led to this victory. But like I said, again, last week, this is kind of what I was saying is the only way the only shot that they stood to try to win this game. And I didn't have any play, side or total, on this game, but I was pulling for the upset like I pull for underdogs often throughout the NFL. And I was happy that they followed that game plan, and I was surprised that they were able to execute it as well as they did. Now, of course, it was a close game. Obviously, we know that the game goes to overtime. A toss-up, whoever won. The Redskins, certainly the right side of the game, going to cover the spread regardless of the result there at the end. But injuring Tony Romo there late definitely didn't hurt anything for the Redskins. Of course, Whedon came in. He actually didn't play terrible when he was in there. And truth be told, when Tony Romo was ordered back into the game, obviously he probably wanted to return, and they wanted him to return, but he came back in there and looked terrible. I posted and tweeted some of the statistics that he had in his few passes and drives that he got when he was back in the game, but I think he gained, on the first drive he was put in there at the end of the fourth quarter, I think he gained 9 or 10 total yards in about a minute and 45 seconds there at the end of the first half. At the end of the game there, they needed to drive down, try to score any type of points to win the game in regulation. I think in that total minute and whatever, he gained a total of about 10 yards himself. And then obviously in overtime, did not play well, did not gain anything because the Redskins went down, kicked the field goal, the Cowboys got the ball back, and I don't even think they could get a first down. So I don't know if it was the smartest decision to put him back in there. It ultimately doesn't matter, though. He did, he lost, the Redskins won, and that's the end of the story.
Kind of funny to be talking about Tony Romo with the ambulance siren there, but just so happened that way. Let's move on to some of these injuries for this upcoming week. We saw Patrick Peterson go out with a concussion in his prior game. He's looking like he's probably going to play, but they are not going to have Stephen Taylor, who was out indefinitely with a calf injury. Their running back, the Baltimore Ravens, their biggest loss was Jimmy Smith, the defensive back. He's listed as week to week right now, but I do not think he's looking likely to play against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is going to be a problem because Andy Dalton, as soon as he went out, was able to pick on his backup, and that became a problem for the Baltimore Ravens secondary. So they at least have some time to prepare a backup for that role against the Steelers, but that'll be interesting. Looking at the Chicago Bears, again, this team seems to always have injuries. Of course, you have the ill-advised discount double-check type celebration from Lamar Houston where he tore his, I believe it's ACL. He's out for the season. Unfortunate for him, especially doing something like that when his team is getting their ass beat. Just ridiculous to celebrate it in that manner and tear up his ACL, and he's done for the season. Kyle Fuller went out of the game. He's got a hip injury. We'll have to see if he's going to be healthy enough to play. The good thing for them is they do have a bye, so these guys aren't going to be, Kyle Fuller might be fine, but Matt Slauson, their guard, he tore his pec in the game, and he's also out for the season. So offensive line took a hit, defensive line took a hit. For the Cincinnati Bengals, the often injured Vontaze Burfict, he's week to week with a knee injury, so we'll have to see if he's able to play this upcoming game against Jacksonville. They might not need him in that game, but certainly they would like to have him there. AJ Green is listed as day-to-day. We're still not sure how severe his toe injury is and when he could come back. Giovanni Bernard is dealing with a hip injury as well. Looking at the Cleveland Browns, Jordan Cameron, he sustained a concussion. He's listed as week to week, so we'll have to see. He's in the concussion protocol. Of course, the aforementioned Tony Romo, he's probably unlikely to play this week. We'll really have to take a good look as to whether he plays against Arizona. But and Justin Durant, they've lost him for the season. He's a linebacker, starting linebacker for them. That's a big injury. He tore his biceps. Looking at the Detroit Lions, Nick Fairley, he messed up his knee. He is out indefinitely. The Green Bay Packers, a division rival there. Aaron Rodgers, he's got the hamstring injury. Now, they are also on a bye, so it's a couple weeks for them. TJ Lang was dealing with an ankle injury, so we'll have to see how these guys are in a couple of weeks. Irrelevant discussing them too much now. For the Indianapolis Colts, Reggie Wayne is listed as likely to play after he missed last week's game with an elbow injury. They've got Eric Walden and Vontae Davis, who we talked about earlier in the podcast. He went out with an injury, a knee injury. Eric Walden, a hip injury. We're not sure what the status is for both of those players, but those guys play on Monday night, so we'll have to see. Jacksonville Jaguars had a couple of guys injured defensively. Defensive backs, Alan Ball, I think ruptured his biceps. He's out for the season, and Will Blackman messed up his finger. He's listed as being out indefinitely. There's two defensive backs for the Jaguars that have hurt themselves, and Luke Jokel, their tackle, he sustained a concussion in their game last week, so those guys are playing Cincinnati on the road this week. Jumping down to the Monday night game, game also, we have Rashad Jennings, whether he'll play or not for the Giants. They were on a bye last week, so they're coming back after their loss to the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, and they're going to be playing this week. We'll have to see if Rashad Jennings is able to play. San Francisco, they came off a bye as well, just like the New York Giants. And will they get Glenn Dorsey this week? Will he be back next week? Their defensive lineman with a biceps injury, they'll have to see. St. Louis Rams, multiple injuries here. This team is really kind of falling apart, and I think that they might be reaching this breaking point where they were able to get some things done offensively with the status of their team as it was, but now they're starting to suffer too many injuries here. They have injuries to tackles, Roger Saffold, obviously Jake Long is out for the season, and center Scott Wells. These guys are all dealing with injuries. How long they'll play, we're not sure. Jake Long is definitely out for the season, of course, that he was out heading into this prior game. Brian Quick, their wide receiver, he went out. He's out for the season with a shoulder injury, so they lost a few guys there, so that's going to be a difficult situation for them. Of course, they play San Francisco in San Francisco off the bye, as I just mentioned. So that's a list of some of the key injuries to keep your eyes and ears out for when you're looking to handicap and plan for what's going to happen in these upcoming games. Let's go ahead and finish up here by talking about some of these games this weekend. Obviously, we got the first game of the week is tonight, New Orleans Saints against the Carolina Panthers. This game is going to be fascinating for a number of reasons. Number one, obviously, you've got the importance to the division. Both these teams need this win. We looked at NFLproject.com. Right now, that's projecting that the New Orleans Saints are going to win this division, but I'm guessing that we're going to get some of the updated information this week that this game right here will probably, along with the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, be the two games, one from the NFC and one from the AFC, that are of utmost importance for playoff positioning, and it looks like probably the team that does not win that game is not going to be making the playoffs, and so it's going to be difficult. If Carolina, obviously they're at home and they're on a short week, and so those are positives for them. But you look at this team, start off the season, Cam Newton playing very, very well. Throwing the ball is better than he's had in his entire career, to be honest with you. And then they go up to Green Bay and look terrible. It was a game where Cam Newton, they were just off the tie against Cincinnati. He had been running read option, really fooling the opponents there in Cincinnati. And then he went to Green Bay and terrible performance. Comes back home thinking that he's going to get a Seattle Seahawks team who is defensively nowhere near what they were last season, and yet this offense could not do anything against that team. Really struggled. And so when you look at this game coming up here, the real question is, what are the New Orleans Saints going to bring to the table here? We know they need this win. We know they played extremely well last week, but they are such a different team on the road than they are at home. It's going to be very difficult for them to get up and play in this game efficiently, offensively, I believe. But the issue is that defense for the Carolina Panthers is so bad. It really was not exposed enough by Seattle. That defense is terrible, and I think New Orleans is really going to put a lot of pressure and really strain that offense, their offense, to produce against the Carolina Panthers. Now they've got a very balanced run and pass game going, so I think that the Saints offense could be effective even though they're on the road in this position. The question is, what is Carolina's offense going to do? How well do you trust Cam Newton to actually perform? We know that the New Orleans Saints defense is not very good. It truly is a problem for them, and but the fact is, Carolina's offense just the past couple of weeks has not really been efficient or effective whatsoever. I think it's difficult laying 3 points on the road on a Thursday night game on a short week after a big win that they had to get at home, so that's a difficult situation for them. It's a pretty high total, although the actual numbers that I have favor the over slightly. The question becomes, what is this Carolina Panthers offense going to bring to the table? Because if this game was in New Orleans, obviously we're going to have a game that's probably dominated in terms of the score early on by the Saints, and the Panthers are going to open it up and play catch-up. But if the Saints offense struggles early, which it typically does on the road, then, especially outdoors, that Saints offense gets off to a slow start. That can give the Carolina Panthers a little bit of room to work with. They don't have as much pressure to try to open things up. So I have a feeling this game could start a little bit slower than expected, and that would hurt a game, very high total, 49.5, 49. So difficult game for this one. Moving ahead to Sunday, San Diego versus Miami. I think this game is fascinating because San Diego, obviously, they've had a couple of tough games, played Denver Broncos last week, and really struggled, didn't look all that great in that game, could not run the ball at all. Now they come down to Miami, and this is going to be a pretty interesting game. I think we're probably going to see some points in this game, is my opinion. I think this total is a little bit too low. I'm actually going to release the over as my free recommendation, one of my free recommendations this week. I'll have a full write-up on that, so that'll be out probably the next day or so, but that's a game I'm looking at the over. You move over to Jacksonville, Cincinnati. Again, this is a pretty easy game. We're talking, like we said in the intro, a big home favorite, a very step up in class for the Jacksonville Jaguars, having to play this game after losing to the Miami Dolphins. They had 2 defensive touchdowns scored against them, a very bad performance offensively for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then they have to go on the road in Cincinnati. It's going to be a tough situation. 11 is a lot of points. Obviously, it opened at 13. I can see the reasoning here for it being bet down to an extent, but you're going to have to really depend on Blake Bortles on the road, and that's going to be a tough situation, I think, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So difficult game here to predict. When you look at the Tampa Bay Bucks at Cleveland, man, Tampa Bay so terrible. Last week, they just not look good. The issue for Tampa Bay was, in my opinion, heading into that game last week, was they really had not faced a very good defense. They played a lot of teams whose defenses were mediocre. They finally went up against a Minnesota Vikings team with a very strong defense, and we saw what happened to that offense. The Cleveland Browns defense is not as good as Minnesota's. They're better than some. They're not as good as their reputation is. It'll be interesting to see how this game goes, but my metrics and my analytics, if you look at the Cleveland Browns defense, just from a pure efficiency standpoint, they're 20th in the league. You can look at a variety of metrics to show that they're bottom half of the league for most of the key defensive metrics. One of the main metrics I would look at here is early down success rate, and this is going to be an interesting matchup because we know that the Cleveland Browns can be a very explosive play offense. They can do some things explosively, get a lot of yardage through the pass game. I'll have to see if Jordan Cameron, their tight end, is healthy, but Tampa Bay's defense, dead last in early on success rate defense, 31st in red zone defense, so a difficult situation there. And Tampa Bay's actually played the league's easiest schedule of opposing defenses, and they still have not produced very well. So I'm not sure what to expect in this game, but some of those stats should tell you a little bit of where I'd be leaning if I had to do something on that game. Washington at Minnesota, we're looking at RG3 coming back for this one. Move the line a little bit more towards the Redskins. Should be an interesting game. I'll have to break this one down a little bit more, but 2, 3, and 5 teams basically out of it, trying to work with some quarterbacks and the offenses and get a little bit better production there. So difficult spot, though, for the Redskins coming off that huge upset outright win on Monday night against the division rival Dallas Cowboys. Going on the road here in Minnesota should be a tough spot for them to be placed in, but the Minnesota Vikings offense, not very good. Defense, much better than offense. That should be tough. Philadelphia at Houston, very fascinating game. I'm really intrigued to see this game. My metrics, I liked Houston going into that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple of weeks ago. They should have won that game. Certainly looked at them last week against Tennessee. They obviously dominated Zach Mettenberger, and that was an easy win for them. So they're playing some pretty good football right now. They're not really getting recognized for it. They're not winning games at the rate to put themselves in playoff contention for it because of the division that they're playing in, and they're only 500 right now. So this is a game they know that they have to win if they have any shot trying to make the playoffs as a wild card seed in the AFC. But in comes the Philadelphia Eagles, who, to be honest with you guys, outplayed the Arizona Cardinals in that game last week. They went 0 for 3 in the red zone. A really strong performance by this Philadelphia Eagles team in general, defensively and offensively. The main concern here would be twofold. Nick Foles, how is he going to perform? He threw some very questionable interceptions last week. I think Darren Sproles is supposed to play in this game. We'll have to see if he does or not, but that offense concerns in the red zone and concerns just in general with Nick Foles. Of course, you get the same type of concerns throwing interceptions and whatnot when you're talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Houston Texans, but the Texans, they should just try to run the ball, keep it in the hands of Arian Foster. That offense is moving the ball very well, and then you just rely on J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney defensively to try to do some things, but Houston's secondary is a problem, so if they can't get enough pressure on the pass rush to disrupt Nick Foles, I think he's going to be able to see some success against that Houston Texans secondary. So it should be an interesting game. The Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Jets, obviously I think Michael Vick is starting this game for the Jets going into Kansas City. 10 points is a lot to be laying, though, for the Chiefs. This is a team that generally wins games a little bit closer because their offense really doesn't do anything to stretch things out. So my initial lean here would probably be towards the Jets, as disgusting as that sounds to you guys. The Jets are a team that, as long as they can avoid some of those turnovers, are capable of playing decent football. Obviously, that's a big if. It's been something that's plagued this team this entire season, and Mike Vick certainly is no savior in that regard. He's going to turn the ball over as well. This Kansas City Chiefs defense is going to wreak havoc on that offensive line and really get after the quarterback. So a risky play, but I think 10 might just be a little bit too much for that spot. Arizona, Dallas, pretty much off the board everywhere. We don't know if Tony Romo is playing. He's obviously very vital to be put into that role. Otherwise, you got Brandon Weeden trying to play this game. Arizona, big fan of Bruce Arians. I'm really looking forward to seeing the way that he's going to attack this defense. I think this probably is going to be one of the biggest tests for the Dallas Cowboys, even if Romo is there, is the fact that this offense for the Arizona Cardinals will be able to stay on the field a little bit and put pressure on the defense of the Dallas Cowboys. Stress them, strain them, attack them where they are weak. I think Bruce Arians is going to be capable of designing some schemes up to help do that, and it's going to put pressure on this Dallas Cowboys defense, which really has not been tested to a great extent this season. And then defensively, I think the Arizona Cardinals could try to get after them, after Tony Romo and that line, just like the Redskins did. We'll have to see what type of pressures Todd Bowles draws up. The obvious concern here taking the Arizona Cardinals is how bad that their red zone offense is, dead last in the league. So that's obviously a problem when you're talking about them going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 11th best red zone offense. Interesting matchup there. Looking at the St. Louis Rams at the San Francisco 49ers, I think we're catching the Rams here at just a very difficult spot in their. We know the second half of that game on Monday night several weeks ago, where the St. Louis Rams looked great in the first half. The 49ers were able to dial up some pressure in that second half, really disrupt Austin Davis, and cause a lot of havoc. I anticipated that same type of thing to occur during the game against the Kansas City Chiefs last week. It surely did. That team could not handle that pressure, and the defense is not very good. So this would be a spot, unlike the Kansas City game, where I'd be looking a little bit more towards the Jets in that spot. Here, it's hard not to look at the San Francisco 49ers. At least I'd be leery of taking the Rams. I've liked the Rams a lot, but I think that this team is just in a very difficult situation here, and the 49ers probably see that division is ripe for the taking. They've got to compete for that wild card spot, though, against the Arizona Cardinals, who are kind of running away with that division to some extent. So they've got to keep winning games, do the 49ers, but they see the Seattle Seahawks as a team that probably they could beat and are trying to do that. So I imagine them coming off the bye being very crisp and sharp at home. Denver Broncos and New England Patriots. Tremendous game here. Obviously, this is going to be must-see. Two 4 o'clock games. I think the Rams game versus the 49ers we just mentioned in this Broncos game, these are going to be the focal points of the day in the afternoon. Nobody is really going to care about that Oakland-Seattle game, of course. It's going to be interesting to see what Seattle does in the game, but more than anything, I think we're looking at the Denver Broncos here at New England. Fascinating game. Denver's defense is better than what people think that it is, but New England's offense has really been clicking right now, and I'm really excited to see the way that this game is going to play out. I won't talk a whole lot about this game, but I'm sure I'm going to have more thoughts on it later in the week for clients, and you're going to have to get on board to read those both on the total as well as the side in this game, I think. Oakland Raiders and the Seattle Seahawks, like I just mentioned. Seattle laying a ton of points. tough spot, tough decision to make if you're going to go ahead and grab the 15 points with the Oakland Raiders. I don't see how you would be laying these points with the Seattle Seahawks in this position. I think it's a lot for this team to be laying, even though people are probably thinking they're going to come back home and they're going to gel and they're really going to crush the Raiders. We'll have to see, but it seems like a lot of points here in this spot. And then you go to the Sunday night game. Awesome game there. Baltimore versus Pittsburgh. Both defenses, if you're talking about the Baltimore Ravens without Jimmy Smith, that's definitely a step down from what this team has been to start the season. If you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, that defense is not very good to begin with. But 48 points is a lot of points for these two teams going at it. Obviously, we saw them. They're certainly more than capable of putting up points in bunches. We know that that's definitely a fact. They can hit some big plays. Concerns here for both teams start with the Baltimore Ravens. Joe Flacco on the road. He has not performed very well on the road historically. Now, he did perform well in Pittsburgh in the past, but this is a tough situation in prime time. They have to win this game, though, after losing that game to the Cincinnati Bengals. So obviously this game opened, I think, with the Pittsburgh Steelers as a 1.5 point favorite, and that line has dropped down. Now the game's a pure pick 'em. I even see the Ravens favored by 1 at spots like LVH in the Greek. So the Ravens have been attracting some early money on this game. Pittsburgh Steelers, concerns there, obviously their defense, and then the question mark becomes, can this team execute inside the red zone? I know they hit on a ton of big plays last week. Same type of situation as they may run into this week. They were dealing with a cornerback, Vontae Davis, who was out. He got hurt during that game. He missed the rest of the game, and they saw some matchups there that they could exploit. Here, the Ravens are without Jimmy Smith potentially, so there are going to be some matchups that the Steelers can exploit there. Should be a very interesting game. Obviously of extreme importance. And then the Monday night game, Indianapolis versus the New York Giants. Early money obviously has been coming in on the Indianapolis Colts to an extent. The New York Giants looked terrible against the Philadelphia Eagles a couple weeks before their bye, went down to Dallas. Obviously, we're attracting some of the more sharp money there at grabbing 7 points with them, and they were close for a little while in that game. They actually played okay in that game, but ultimately did not come away with the cover there. The sharp money has been taking the Colts for a couple of weeks now, but I'd be surprised if we didn't see some late money, people buying the home underdog here in this spot towards the end of the week once this line gets as high as it could possibly go. Both these teams are over teams. Both these teams have defensive issues. And the Indianapolis Colts, I think what we're seeing is that this is a team that is better defensively at home in their dome and less strong on the road. We obviously saw them struggle in Pittsburgh last week, and if Vontae Davis is missing this game, and if they can't get enough pressure on Eli Manning, then I think the Giants' offense could get some things going in the pass game. We know that the Indianapolis Colts are going to be able to get some things going too. I really think that the New York Giants are going to try to come out and really establish the run and really set Eli Manning up with some very high percentage throws to get really situated in a strong groove. It'll be interesting to see how this team responds coming out of the bye week. Really out of contention in that division for the NFC East, and it's sad to say that because they are only 3-4. I mean, theoretically they could still go on a run here and walk away with 9 wins, but you look at the two teams in that division already. When you're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles are 5-2, when you look at the Dallas Cowboys that are 6-2, and you're sitting there at 3-4, and you got the Redskins there at 3-5. It's just tough. I don't think the Giants really should realistically look at trying to win the division. They just got to take it one game at a time. And first game here is to go ahead and try to upset Andrew Luck in this spot. So I think we got some great games in primetime. Obviously, I really love the primetime slate of games here when you're talking about the Thursday night game, the Sunday night game, and the Monday night game. I think all are fascinating. Really looking forward to that 4 o'clock game with obviously Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Should be tremendous. And then I think there's a number of early games that are going to be interesting. The San Diego-Miami game is going to be great. I think the Philadelphia-Houston game is going to be excellent as well, as will that Arizona-Dallas game. So there's a number of games there that I think are going to be very interesting, but there's certainly a number of snoozers there that you're either going to have to grab some of the points with the big underdogs or potentially stay away from them. It's just difficult to lay double digits in the NFL and expect those plays to hit with a high degree of consistency. So there you have it, Week 9 edition of the Rearview Mirror podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next week.
This is gonna be a fun ride. This is gonna be a fun ride. Everybody one clap. I'm gonna play when I wanna play, do what I wanna do. I'm gonna say what I wanna say. Did I say anything stupid today? My role is to take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. Take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. If I can't get to it, nobody can get to it. I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie. I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie. Everybody one clap, one clap, one clap, one clap.